Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our series, Can You See Us, Black Women in Sports? We are so excited about, as usual, but I always say our panels can't get any better. And then something like this happens, and you really realize just how powerful our community of Black women are. And we have some great representatives of that community on this show. But before we get started and introduce our panelists, I'd like to introduce you to my co host and someone who I dearly love and admire for all that she does for our community and for sports is Dr. Ingrid will introduce ABIS. We are ABIS. Dr. Ingrid.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited about being here. I even wore my pearls tonight because we have such distinguished queens on this call tonight. But on behalf of ABIS, which is Advancement of Blacks in Sports, I serve as the executive director, and our mission is to connect and inspire people to boldly advocate for racial equity, social and economic justice for Blacks in sports. And we are so excited to be a part of In Pursuit of Greatness. And we will continue to have programs throughout the year, as you just saw the gala promotion. And so we're hoping that people will join us in Vegas, June 2nd through the 4th for our symposium, as well as the gala, really in celebrating champions and legends. And so please take a look at our website. We are abis.org, and consider joining our mission in trying to make sure that Blacks in sports is equitable, economic, and social justice.
Thank you for that. And now we're missing two panelists. They'll be on soon, but we are not at a loss right now for phenomenal panelists. So I see LaChina has joined us. Hi, Miss LaChina, how are you?
Hey, Coach Bev, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited about you being here. So I'm going to introduce the baby's first ladies, which is Miss LaChina, who, along with Swin, will be on the show soon. But they are phenomenal women in representation of the WNBA, who, by God, has done the best job of advocating on behalf of each other. I must say that women's basketball is really leading the way on how to unite and provide seats at the table for everyone. And I'm so proud of them, from administrative down to players. They take care of each other, and coaches. So LaChina is an analyst. I don't know how many years, over 15 years in the WNBA. I mean, she is a Hall of Famer, award winning type player, personality, and advocate for our community of women and for minorities in general. So, LaChina, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to hear from you. And I also have to go to another phenomenal athlete on the show. People may not realize that Leslie Maxey, who is a media magnet, an entrepreneur, philanthropist, all of those things, was also an Olympic medalist and an Olympian. Phenomenal athlete, phenomenal person, and an entrepreneur. All the women on the show are entrepreneurs. I just had to put that out there. The other ones, now we go to the wisdom of our groups. If you ever want an advocate for diversity, inclusion, and equity, call Dr. Fry. Dr. Jen talks, but she walks the talk she walks. An entrepreneur, an advocate, she fills in the spaces, and she boldly tells the stories and the truth of our entire community. Dr. Jen, thank you so much for joining us here. But when we talk about trailblazers, how do you become the first woman to be a commissioner of the CIAA in this day and age? Not only that, but Commissioner McWilliams is the first female Black person to become a commissioner of any conferences in the country, Division One, two, or three. And along with that, she has co-founded a program called, what is it? Sudden Change.
Yay.
And that's what this conversation is going to be about. We are change agents. So I'm not going to waste any time because we got a lot of panelists and a lot to talk about. And this is about hearing your voices and imparting that wisdom and knowledge upon our community. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to hit really hard to the issue. So I'm going to start with you, LaChina, because this was a question directed for you and Schwinn whenever Schwinn comes on.
Yeah,
and then
she said she thinks she's in the waiting room, but she's not sure. Can you see her in there?
Can you make sure that Schwinn gets onto the show? If not, we can definitely make sure she gets the link. China, can you send her your link? Just
yeah,
in case?
she's in it. I think because she's on her phone, it may not work as well. So I'm gonna tell her. I told her to get on the laptop.
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay.
So here's our first question that'll lead into the second question for the other panelists.
Okay.
Angel Reese has the most NIL deals of any female athlete, but is not paid the highest. People are now saying they don't mind staying in college because the NIL deals are paying more than the WNBA for some people. I know it's a rarity, but it's getting to that point. As you look upon the disparity of play with the heart and soul that the WNBA brings to the wire, and you starting to see women's basketball really, have to be honest with you guys, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, they garnered more excitement in the Division One playoffs than any other gender or division. So as we climb, why is it, do you think, that Angel has to have such volumes just to make money that some of them have half the deals and make as much? What do you think the disparity is, and what does the WNBA need to do to increase its earning potentials? I know that's a lot, but I had to set the ground rule for them, is that I want to know.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, a very nuanced question. But first and foremost, I think what we see happening as far as the lack of value for Black women in sport is the same as what we see in our world, right? Sport is a microcosm of what's happening in a macro way, in that Black women aren't valued. We're not paid on the dollar as the majority is paid. We're not hired when we should be. We're not promoted when we should be. We're invisible in our world. And in particular, I think about that a lot in the field that I work in, is like, how can we bring Black women more visibility? We're not represented. So the list goes on and on and on. And that trickles down to the lack of value that you may see for someone like an Angel Reese. But I've always felt that way about the WNBA in general, and it's something that really sticks with me, because when I look at our white counterparts, and in particular soccer, for example, which is a predominantly blonde sport, white women, they serve as what our world sees as, this is what women in sports could look like if we even believed in women's sports in general, right? So white women have long been the standards, and WNBA has struggled to get the same level of sponsorship, of exposure. And I know it has everything to do with the fact that it's a predominantly Black league. And so again, sport is a microcosm of what's happening in our greater world, in that Black women are often buried. I think when sponsors and businesses get into the room and they make decisions about how they're going to spend their dollars, they're not thinking about Black women. And what I am hopeful for is that some of the trends that we are seeing recently, in recent years, I would say, with the WNBA, I hope that continues, right? The 2020 bubble season was a chance for the WNBA to kind of captivate the world, in that they were back playing when other sports were not. And we saw what they did with their social justice movement there, on behalf of Breonna Taylor. We saw what they did in terms of helping to overturn the Senate, with Raphael Warnock. And so we saw the power of what Black women in sport can do with their platform, with their power, with their voices. And I think people were paying attention, and we're starting to see ratings go up. We're starting to see social media numbers and interactions go up. We're starting to see more deals for WNBA players that look like me, instead of the our white counterparts always getting the money, always getting the visibility, always getting the deal. So slowly we're starting to see change. Is it happening fast enough? No, not at all. But I think what we see happening with Angel Reese and the lack of value, even though she has more deals, is exactly what we see happening for Black women in many aspects of sport. I would say, not just in the actually athletes themselves, but I'm sure many of the women on this call that work in the front offices and have various experiences in sport can say the same. That we're just not paid and not respected and not valued the way we should be.
Mhm.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, ladies, we account for 14% of the female population, but 42%, over 42% of new businesses opening by women are opened by Black women. So because is it because we're not received into the corporate world in general, and so we're recreating our own spaces, which is what a lot of WNBA has done. They've taken it upon themselves to advocate for themselves. What is you guys' read on this from your perspective? And Leslie, Commissioner McWilliams, and Dr. Jen, you guys all come from a different perspective on this. So Leslie, we'll start with you, and then Dr. Jen and the commissioner will come in.
Well, I appreciate you quoting that stat, and it's quite shocking. American Express did a study about Black wealth over the last 5 years, and what they found was Black women are entering the space of entrepreneurship at a strikingly high rate. But when you think about funding, for instance, that happened over the last year and a half, 2 years, there were $2 billion that were attributed to Black entrepreneurs, $147 billion to predominantly white entrepreneurs. So
wait a minute, say that stat again so that they can really get the gist of that stat.
2 billion as opposed to 147 billion. Yeah, it's like that. And I think, just like LaTrina said, it is indicative of the system that we have in America. Black women aren't ever not gonna work. And so you get to a point when you look up the rung and you don't see anyone that looks like you, or very few, and you decide, I'm going to strike it on my own, because if I'm going to work, at the very least, I'm going to be able to chart my own path and create my own destiny. And that's what many of us end up doing. But when I think about the NIL situation, the number one NIL athlete right now is a Black young man. His name is Chase Griffin. He's a backup quarterback at UCLA. He used the pandemic to get his master's degree, and now he's getting his law degree. But he came in with a plan. And that's what I would say for our women, irrespective of if you're talking about NIL or you're talking about entrepreneurship. We have to own our stories. We get to own our stories, and to be able to message our stories in such a way where people can be touched, moved, and inspired to action. That's when you get the change that you need to have happen, that we need to have happen. And so I'm so glad to be in a space where I'm helping entrepreneurs, particularly women in our mid-love years. We call them midlife and loving it. To be able to tell our stories and create our lives 2.0 in a way that really honors everything that we have done from an experience perspective, and everything that we're looking to do in our lives, because we're living longer and healthier lives than any generation of women in history, particularly Black women. And if you want to have access, you gotta come through us. So we need to leverage our power.
Mhm.
Oh, that is a powerful, powerful statement. And I'd like to just pause here and say thank you to you. Thank you to LaChina. Thank you to Swin for stepping into the media world, because the representation means an ability to tell our story. And I see Swin is also joined us. So welcome. We'll get back with you, but we have to go to Dr. Jen to get your perspective on this area.
Yeah. So, Bev, first of all, I appreciate y'all having me on here, and I think there's a few things to kind of jump off of what Leslie said. So the first thing is that we're seeing a lot of Black women start businesses just because there's a lack of opportunity within the traditional workforce. We're not getting the promotions, we're not getting the salary raises, we're not getting the things that we need to survive. So because of that, we're jumping out and starting our own businesses. Right now, I have 2 businesses. I'm acquiring a third one right now. And so just that's kind of where my entrepreneurship is. I'm a professional speaker. I own a tech company, and I'm also buying another tech company right now. So you see that we have a lack of opportunity within traditional workspaces. So we have to go find our thing. The second thing, and what COVID really showed us, is that traditional workspaces are really unsafe and have a lot of harassment and microaggressions. And so you saw a lot of Black women who are like, I was able to work at home and not deal with that. And now you want me back in the office? Baby, I'm just going to start my own business. Like, I'm not going to deal with that. I'd rather go out on my own and figure this out than have to deal with that. The third thing I think is that we're fixing problems for ourselves. We have a nuanced issue, whether it's with hair, skin, and we have problems that other people don't know how to fix. And then that is a direct correlation to funding. Because they don't know how to fix our issues, they are not going to fund us. They don't understand our critical need for certain hair products, certain skin products, makeup that fits our complexion. So they don't understand that, so they won't fund us. And we have to sit there and beg for money to explain why this is important to people that this will never be important to. Their foundation will always be shown. They don't have to worry about that. They can go buy Suave or any type of hair thing, slap it on their hair, and they're good to go. They don't have to have an intricate mask or whatever it is to make sure that their hair looks appropriate. And so because of that, they don't see a need to fund stuff. Because if you talk to a lot of Black, so within my tech company, I'm doing fundraising, stuff like that. And you talk to people and it's like, you have to prove why your issue is important to people who really don't care about the issue.
Mhm.
And also because the whole thing about entrepreneurship is you are solving problems. You have to figure out a problem to be solved. The issue is that we are asking for money from people who fundamentally don't see that there's an issue to be solved. So if they don't see that there's an issue to be solved, then they don't see a need to fund us.
And that's critical because we also are high level consumers. And so we must own that space and know that we bring value to the table and make demands and support those who are in the business of business.
Mhm.
Commissioner McWilliams.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in all of this. I mean, I was sitting here writing notes like access to capital, healthcare, leaving a legacy, the barriers, the leveraging our power. I mean, the barriers start when we're born. I mean, I have a 17-year-old that I'm sitting here negotiating or trying to help her negotiate in an English class with a white boy who's trying to eliminate her voice on a project. I mean, so it starts so early. The barriers start so earlier, even access to capital. When I watched the Division I women's basketball tournament, Division II women's basketball tournament, Division III women's basketball tournament, and I watch who's all playing in the beginning of the tournament, and then I watch who's ending in the finals and the championships, particularly for Division I. And then we talk about, our Black women who are mostly seen in the WNBA who are getting recruited, who are majority of that, but they're not the majority in the entire universe of the game, which is always interesting to me because when I go to a Division II national championship, D3, you get to the championship, you don't see us on the court. You might see one or two of us on the court. But when I go to the WNBA or watch a game there, I see us. Right? If I go and see the Final Four, I'm watching to see who gets to the end. And normally you'll see more of us at the end, the talent that's there. And so when you think about the barriers and the NIL of our Black and brown students. I think we're all on point there. I mean, we already have issues with access to capital as a commissioner. As you all are sitting up here on the call, as you all are trying to navigate to have a space in ESPN or CBS or wherever we are, and it's a constant battle. But I think the beauty of it is that we are seeing us in the space. Now that we're in the space, how do we negotiate for ourselves and help others negotiate for themselves so that we are all negotiating together? I don't think that we can sit in these positions and be silent about the pay not happening, about not having access to the same opportunities. Now, does it take a little bit more work? Absolutely, it does. My white colleague females and male counterparts in this position, it's always challenging. They're always going to be reached out first before me and Sonia and my other sisters that are in now that are commissioners. But we have figured a way to create a space for ourselves and talk about how we're negotiating amongst ourselves and find out how others are negotiating, so we put ourselves in position. There's a lot of work to be done. We've been the last as Black women in this country forever, but we've always been the first to press through those barriers and to make things happen. And we can't stop doing that.
Absolutely.
So Beth,
Swin, yes, go ahead.
just real quick, I just want to say all these points in terms of right. And I think about how as a new business owner, and Jen is my model. She's done just a phenomenal job, and I just had to plug in. I've known her since. But anyway, having that feeling of right, we're not good enough. You know, I had an opportunity to do a team retreat for a group of 5 women's basketball program. And, you know, I was getting ready, and then the coach said, who was a Black male, well, I need someone that's certified. Well, I know what that meant. Right. And so, but you have to take it and you keep moving on, right? Because that it wasn't meant for you at that point. But right, Jackie, you talk about how do I train, how do I teach my daughter? And I think about my daughter, and it's not enough for when our parents, our moms told us we have to work harder because we are women and Black. Now it is that plus how to work smarter, how to push through. And it's so many more levels of that, right, how do I do this and teach my 19-year-old to survive and thrive. So I love those points, and thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Swin, the one thing I admire about Angel Reese and her teammates, and you've been in the game a long time, and we were taught to be diplomatic and professional and not defend ourselves, but show an image that is closer comfort to them than who we are in our community, because we come from a very diverse set of community. What do you think has changed to make this generation and say, no, accept me as I am, and I'm unapologetic about who I am, and they're standing in their space as a reporter and player and award winner? What's your position on all of this, and how do you feel about it?
Well, yes. Well, first, Bev, thanks so much for having me. And thank you to all the women that are on this call today. All phenomenal and doing amazing things. And so stand in the gap always with my sisters. I appreciate you all. In regards to the young people, and I think especially young Black women right now, I think the one thing that they're seeing and have an opportunity maybe to do that we didn't is the ability to become the CEO of me. And I say this a lot, my husband and I talk about it, is that at their fingertips, they are in control of their brand. They are in control of who they are. They're in control of what they put out. And as much as it can be a negative and a deterrent in a lot of different ways, they are figuring out the value earlier about what it is to be an entrepreneur, right? And so if you think about, like, I wasn't taught at a young age about brand or being an entrepreneur, how to make decisions. And these young people are being brought up in that space now. And their voices are being able to be heard around the world by just a click of a button. And so when you start realizing and growing up in that power, you walk a little different. And that's where I think I see the biggest difference is when you mention the NILs now. I mean, China will tell you, I think back to college and I'm like, man, I miss generational wealth, literally, by not having the ability to access to that. But the beauty in that is now not only are the young people speaking their truths about who they are, they're understanding the power behind it by using their platform, not only financially, but for social change. And so this dynamic is changing. And the more they keep trying to put the genie back into the box of, oh, you have to be this way, they are opening their wings and flying and saying, no, I am unapologetically me. And so for me, the next step to that is putting the education behind it as well, so they understand. For those who may not understand the access that they have and how to utilize it, is about becoming a business and the CEO of you. Like, you can go through college at this point right now and create for yourself not only more financial wealth, more access, more connections than you will once you turn pro, or you go off into the real world and have to get a job. And so the power in college right now has shifted, I think, even from the pro level. And I mean that consistently, not even just the women, also the men. Like, there are some people we look at now, and for myself, those who don't know on the call, I work for New Orleans Pelicans in the NBA. There are players I look at and I'm like, I hope he makes a business decision to not try to come out in this draft, because he's going to make more money and get his education at school. Like, that is unheard of. Like, you're chasing your dream, but now the shift is happening. I hope that's better for the collegiate level.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like to because she opened a whole new way of thinking on that. Would anybody else like to comment?
So when I like that. And so I think the thing we also have to note, and I'm going to go back, Bev, to your original question you asked LaChina about Angel Reese. Nothing pisses people off more than Black women who can self-advocate for themselves. And that's what we saw, is like these Black women. Angel was like, bro, this is me. I'm going to wear my long lashes. I'm going to wear all these things. This is me. I'm going to self-advocate. And that pisses them off even more, that we are self-advocating boldly as hell. And we're getting these NIL deals, and we're getting money, and we're all these things that before were so distant from us. Now we can do that. And that makes people mad, because then it goes to the stereotypes. She's loud, she's aggressive, she's coarse, she doesn't have class. All these things, like you said, Twin, to kind of put the genie back in the bottle. If I weaponize these words against you, you will be quiet. Then you will stop advocating for yourself, and you will stop getting money. And so my goal is to try and say as much as I can to make you be quiet. You know, one of the things I always say is that words without behaviors are weapons.
Yeah.
And what we see with this is how people weaponize words to silence us. So what they try and do is like, Angel is she doesn't have any class. Look at her. She's rude. She's disrespectful. I'm going to keep beating you with these words to silence you, because if I can silence you, I take away your power, I take away your advocacy, and I take away your money. If I take away your money, then I've won that game, and that money is going to go to someone else.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Jen. I want to jump in too on that, and that, you know, social media has clearly changed the game. Just going back to what Swin said, I mean, I think we had like instant messenger, and that was it. All we could do is leave a little away message and go, you know, get an attitude out here. Like, no one knew
we had
what we were
email.
going
We had that. We had fax and email. What are you talking about?
So it's changed the game, and I think in ways that now I did not know what I didn't have. Right? Because I couldn't just get on my phone and say, well, at NC State, they got this, or at this school, they have that. Like, you can get on your phone now and see disparities. And so Black women are able to see now in different ways, especially those that are in college, like what opportunities are there for them? What are their white counterparts receiving? How is so-and-so getting treated? Now, that has created the transfer portal as well, which is not a great thing. But this generation is not just happy to be here. And I remember when I was coming up, you know,
say that again, LaChina. They're not what?
This generation is not just happy to be here. And I remember being taught, and we should appreciate our history and Title IX and how far we've come in women's sports. And, you know, once we didn't have this and, you know, all those things. But that's not good enough anymore for this generation, right? And I wish, looking back, there are things I should have been advocating for, but I was taught, be grateful, you have a scholarship, you have an opportunity to play, you're not playing for your college education, blah, 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 all these things. And in reality, I wish I had been strong enough to say, no, we want what the men have. No, we want, you know, I wish that I had that voice. And so that's what I think this generation is really about, is they have access. They know what they should be getting. They are educated because they have the internet and they have information at their fingertips, and they are unapologetic, and they want more. And I love it. I mean, Sedona Prince she did not hesitate to put that little baby weight room on the internet. She was like, "Oh no, this is wrong." Right? and I don't think, at least I know, my generation didn't have the platform to do that. And in some sense, we were made to feel be grateful for what you have. And I'm glad that these women have a different approach.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that,
Yes, please.
which is, it's so funny because and China will tell you this too, as I've been having these conversations, and I get so giddy when I see like our young sisters just being proud of who they are, unapologetic, because I did walk in the shoes, and I was like, she's a diva. She wants too much. She's asked too many questions. Where's the gratefulness? Oh, Swin is so sweet. If you're gonna get this, you're gonna get that. And my mom used to always say, like, your thought process was ahead of your time. And so I look at it now as a lot of these young girls are walking through doors that a lot of women who felt we should be getting more and who said something or felt strong about it didn't get the opportunity to have. And that's totally okay. I'm good with that, because there are women who came before me who didn't receive what I was able to receive as I was coming through the process. That's how it works. But what I've learned is that they put you into a box and you're supposed to be there. Even now for myself, being an executive, it's like, you have this job. How dare you actually think about going and also being an entrepreneur? How do you find the time for that? You need to be right over here. And I'm saying and showing day in and day out is we have the capabilities to balance all of that, boo. Like, you ain't see our mamas and how we grew up and had multiple jobs and working and doing all these things and still being successful, because we learn how to balance, how to thrive. And so I think it's really funny. And I say this even now as I move forward and try to invest. Last year, when I was going through that process and going into the Hall of Fame, I really took a spiritual kind of journey for myself, right? Reflection on who you are, how you show up. How do you give to other people? What does it look like? How much of your time do you have also trying to be a mom? And it really just came up about being intentional and giving back in a way that empowers other people. And I think conversations like this have to be out there for young girls, young women, Black women to see that it's okay. And I think more of these conversations have to keep happening.
And I go back to Kelly Lawson and Joy Collective, who pushed for the Crown Act, which deliberately dealt with how, and particularly Blacks, but women are allowed to wear their hair in spaces. That's how meticulous we've had to become with our representation in spaces. Ladies, I'm going to open the floor. If anybody wants to add to that before the next question, please do. Just jump in.
Well, you know what, Beth?
Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Kelly Richardson Lawson, because she's somebody that has consistently looked for the issue or experienced the issue herself and come up with a solution, and then brought all of her sister network together, because she went to Howard, and AC was at Howard, Kim Page was at Howard, and these women are tops in boardrooms, Fortune 50 companies now, bringing their resources to these problems and solving them, actually beating corporate at corporate's game, seeing them, recognizing it, and honoring it. I love that. She did the same thing with the Sunrise Project. Had an issue with mental health and wellness in her family, discovered that there weren't a lot of resources for young Black men, and then she became the resource. Now she's got an own podcast, and it's amplified worldwide. So, if we are, and you talk about intentionality and looking at ourselves, being reflective and saying, how am I showing up? Who am I being? How am I coming at excellence? Is it excellence by force, excellence by chance, default, or flow? Flow being the highest level. We need to create the experience that we have in everything that we do, if we'll take that time to be reflective and level up to to where we actually want to be, because great teams have both the excellent outcome, but also the personal transformation. And I think if we can marry those two together in what we're doing from an entrepreneurial space, it gives us the ability to both achieve wealth and legacy, but also doing it in a way that honors ourselves and our mental wellness and our self-care, everything that we need to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I could add, I love all of that. And as I'm sitting here reflecting on my own experience and, working for an HBCU conference and have been outside of the HBCU world and chose to come back inside the HBCU world, I recognize part of my strength and growth has because I went to Hampton. And many of us who have gone to HBCUs, our challenges are very different when we get outside, because we go in ready to fight and learn how to advocate for ourselves. Those are tools that we've been taught as athletes. Those are tools that we're taught on campus with our professors, how we stand in line forever, how we just fight. I mean, it's those things that we have learned at our HBCU institutions that I'm seeing now with our presidents and the intentionality to make sure that they understand economic wealth, legacy, giving back, community, power, empowered. Like, how do we do that within our communities? And I don't think that happens in all institutions, and it should. But even if it doesn't, again, those who did attend those institutions that are not HBCUs, how you reach back and how you help the angels and how you help those athletes that that may have struggles and getting in the pipelines. That's our responsibilities when we do get in those positions. We have, my generation, we were taught to be silent, like you said, just be grateful, my daughter is not having it, right? So we're teaching our kids the difference of passive aggressive, how to be assertive and not be aggressive, right? Because everyone thinks, not everyone, but the thought of Black women being aggressive and all, no, we are assertive. And I think how we choose our words.
And passionate. We're passionate. They take our passionate as being combative, and we're passionate about what we believe in.
And we do. And I think that's okay. I don't think we should apologize by what we advocate for and how we are intentional about what our needs are and setting boundaries around that and how we're helping others along the way. I think we get troubled when we silence ourselves in rooms, we silence ourselves, and LaChina, you are in that space and you guys have the opportunity to help tell that story and how you're in those rooms with the people who are telling the wrong story. How do you make sure that doesn't happen or it's corrected? Same thing here. When I'm with my colleagues, how do I correct that when we're looking at applicants and they're saying certain things about different applicants, whether they qualify or not, or students who should get scholarships and not get scholarships? I mean, it's a lot of work on us, but somebody has to do it. And if we're in the position to do it and have that voice to advocate, we've got to know. And if you don't know how to do it, we've got to learn how to do it from somewhere, because it's too important to lose sight of these young people who are truly going to make a difference in the world that we live in right now. And if we keep sitting behind and waiting on our change, they're going to just surpass us, right? And we're going to be trying to catch up with them. And I'd like to think that we should be moving along with them in this world of shift and changing of what we're seeing, especially our women of color. They need us. They see us, but how we advocate for them as much as we're advocating for each other is important.
Dr. Ingrid, would you like to add anything on before I go to the next question?
I'm just taking notes. So I'm just trying to, just all CEO of you, advocating for ourselves. I think for me, when I retired last June, I wanted to stay involved, and I wanted to stay involved specifically to advocate for our young Black men and women, our student athletes, our coaches. And so I agree, my entire career was in HBCU basically, and for a reason. It served a purpose. The success that I wanted to see was everybody else's success. And so you're correct, Jackie, you coming back to the HBCU and then in the conference meant so much to a lot of people, and you stayed the course, and we know that what your purpose is. But thank you for that.
I wanted
Dr.
to.
Jen,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Jen. I'll go after you.
did you want to add something in? And then LaChina.
Yeah, I think when we talk about especially young Black women, and advocate for themselves. So my company, Gen Fry Talks, I pivoted from talking about anti-racism heavily to talking at the intersection of conflict and DEI. And I asked, what does it look like if we peel back the layers of conflict to then move forward to talking about inclusion? Because conflict tends to be the thing that stops people. And so kind of a few things. First, I think about that as Black women, how we've had to figure out who we are in terms of the battle we're fighting. Because, one thing so just to kind of give you a precursor, Wick has known me since I was like 22. I went to
don't know who Wick is.
Oh, sorry, Ingrid, Dr. Ingrid Rickle McCree. So she has known me since I was like 22, 23, where the first conference we met, she said I either talked the whole time or slept the whole time, which is a very valid assessment that I did that for the 5 days. But one thing that she said that she was proud of me, and I actually took notes on this because this was kind of humorous. And she says that I came a long way from being, she says, you've come a long way of being authentically filtered from saying, fuck, I want to say whatever I want to say. And that is a growth, right? Like, because, beep, when I say whatever I want to say.
You can say what you want to say on this show.
No, don't do that. Don't do that, Coach Bev.
Don't do that. Don't do it.
Don't do it to me.
We're going to get real unfiltered.
So I think in terms of Black women, we have to figure out who we are as we move forward through this journey of how we're going to fight these battles, because the 22, 23, 25-year-old Jen is very different from the 42, 43-year-old Jen. And we really need to show them how you battle differently at different ages, different parts of your life, different positions you have, because it's not always going to be the same. And so we have to make sure we talk about that. And the second thing, I think when we talk about this idea of aggressive or assertive, the one thing I always tell people is that if anyone calls you aggressive, you need to make sure they give you behaviors, because if not, they're just trying to silence you. Everyone needs to always give behaviors. If they say, you know what, LaChina, I felt like you made me uncomfortable or you're aggressive, well, what behaviors were attached to that? Because many times there's not behaviors, because what we tend to see is that we live in a very conflict avoidant society. White women in general are very conflict avoidant. So because of that, anything that's assertive to them is aggressive. They don't know what assertive in them means. So if they don't know what assertive in them means, they definitely don't know what it in you looks like. So all they're going to say is that you're aggressive, because they don't know that line. What do I look like as assertive? What do I look like as aggressive? And so if I don't know it, I'm going to assume everything that you do and then compound on the stereotypes is aggressive. And so that's why I tell people, like, you got to flesh it out. If people are using these weaponized words of you're aggressive, you're loud, well, what behaviors are attached to that?
Right.
Because if there's not behaviors, they're just trying to silence you. And I would just be like, I'm going to pass on those words, because they can harm me in the future if they're not talked about immediately.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I'm gonna start asking that question, turning it back on them, right?
Yeah.
What was the behavior that was attached to that? I like that, Jen. So I just wanted to go back to something that Kamish talked about as far as like our opportunity in the media to shift narrative. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get into media, and I'm sure Swin and other women that have worked in this space can speak to this, is that, I wanted to give Black athletes a voice, right? Like I used to, when I was a player, I would walk into the gym and every time we had a game, it would either be a white woman covering our game or a white man, right? And so there was a disconnect. I never saw an opportunity for me to have this amplified platform, to have this voice in our sport. And so, when I looked at the WNBA, I was like, wow, like, majority Black women, but the people that are covering the sport and telling the stories weren't Black. And I this year, and I haven't even shared this with very many stories, but one of our Hall of Famers retired. Her name was Sylvia Fowles. And, one of the things she told me, she was like, you were one of the first people in media to actually see me. I mean, we're talking about someone who's had a Hall of Fame career and felt like invisible to the media. And so we do have a job and a responsibility as Black women in this space to amplify the platforms, the voices, the issues, the performances, to create narrative for our Black female athletes. And there was an article that came out maybe last year that said, despite, and it might have said, majority of the WNBA is Black, maybe 80%, and a majority of the award winners in the league being Black this year, something like 70% of the articles or the media that came from these different platforms were on white players.
Wow.
So
That's
you
a
do,
stat for you.
you do that math, right? And so we do have a job, and that's why in my nonprofit, you know, I'm bringing women of color with me into media. I brought 5 Black women to the Final Four. They were in the locker room having conversation with Angel Reese. Like, we want these athletes to look out in the media and feel like they see a face that can accurately tell their story, that they can identify with, that you know, just someone in that space that understands them beyond who they are as an athlete. So it absolutely, you know, comes back to us. Now, granted, to Swin's point, a lot of these women have their own voice. They can write their own stories, and you know, they have their own platforms now. But still, there is a need in traditional media for those of us that have the opportunity to do so, to make sure that our Black women and their accomplishments aren't ignored, and that we see them authentically for who they are, both on and off the court.
Yeah.
I want to add in right now just something very quickly. When I was coaching, I won 7 national championships. I'm only one behind Pat Head Summit, who won 8 for all-time winners. To Dr. Ingrid's point, they would hire consultants on winning who were white male or white female. Some never even played a sport, and some who coached or played and never won, over hiring someone like me, who knows how to win, by the way. And then secondly, when I was coaching at Texas and at Florida, by the time I got to Texas, I had gotten so many, what do you call those features, Leslie? Because Leslie has done a couple on me, that the track and field Division I committee said, we're not going to waste time on this many features anymore. So when they re-signed the telecast, they diminished the number of features because I was being featured almost every year in some form or fashion. So this is a space where the stressors for Black women who want to be progressive, because we're fighting for not only what we're not getting, but for being overly punished like they tried to do Angel. As you step into this space, Black women are, as we're climbing to the top without enough support, they're getting beaten up. And that's why I'm grateful that Angel actually survived to a certain degree and thrived in that space of attacks. So what do you guys feel as media and as directors, your responsibility? Because I've always felt that I had a responsibility to be perfect, so that they would make and demand someone who looked like me, but I am a winner, which Swin, you know, when you're a winner, you tunnel vision, and they don't like that. And then when you take that and become an advocate in your space, because all of us who had a platform at some point, what do we do with those platforms that could help move the needle of unity and isolation? Because that's really what Angel was able to do. She used her social media platform and those of others. And next thing you know, where they tried to make her the villain, her community made her the hero. So how do we continue that space? And how do we support that from generations above them? I don't know if that question makes sense to you guys. I hope it does. So Leslie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense, Bev. You know, I think about what you just said, LaTrina, and I started in media when I was 9 years old. The first television show I did the last sit-down interview with Jesse Owens before he passed away when I was 13. So when I came back to media, it was because I saw Pam Oliver on the sideline. And I said, oh my God, I can do that. Representation matters. Step past that, it's important to teach our younger generation how the game is played. When I was reporting, I would sit down with a subject and just chat them up to get to understand how much they knew about what we were doing. Hey, this is a package. Answer the question in a complete sentence, because my question is actually not going to be part of the story. Oh, I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me. That's okay. And so in that capacity, what it did was it showed me that our young people, particularly women, needed media training. So to make that transition, the first person I did it with was actually a Black male Super Bowl champion. I won't name him because I always said this would be confidential, but when he saw what I was doing, reporting, anchoring, sideline reporting, he said, I want to do what you're doing, but I have to enter the space as a Super Bowl champion. I can't go to Huntsville, Alabama and do reps. I have to enter as a Super Bowl champion. So it made me take a step back and look at what I did and how I got there and actually operationalize it, put a framework around it so that it was something that people could see and they could insert their information there and be able to use that framework to move their dreams forward. If we're able to impress upon our young Black women that this is how the game is played, have your platform, but also understand who you are in the context of greater media, if you can do those two things, as well as we exist in relationships. I'm here for you, you're here for me, and together we're better. So
Wait a minute. That's powerful right there. That's one of the things that we're missing. I'm here, like every woman on this call is here because they care.
Yeah.
Not because I'm great. I just threw
I'm
that out
telling you,
there.
Bev,
But because you care about our community and the greatness that is underrepresented in our community. Important.
there are too many people that poured into me to get me to this point for me not to set aside time intentionally when there are a certain number of hours per week that I spend mentoring. You call, you got a question, I'm going to bring you in at this time. I'm going to give you some homework because I can't want this more than you want it for yourself. But if you really want it, I can help you get there. And I think that's how we help one another move forward, and that's how we really lay a foundation for our young women that they can stand on top of our shoulders and see things that we've never seen.
I love that.
Absolutely. I think for me right now, one of the ways that I'm showing up, and like I said earlier, last year was definitely a spiritual journey for me, especially getting to the end of the year. And I decided to create a platform called She's Got Time. And the reason behind this platform was not just, it just popped up out of nowhere. It really was a combination of real life experiences and what I have been experiencing as a Black woman taking this position in the NBA, right? Whereas I would walk into all these different arenas and other executives would come up and they would ask me a question and they'd be like, hey, I'm trying to find another you. And I'd be like, I'm not a unicorn, but how can I help you? I'm like, we're women, we're out there, Black women. Yes, there's a lot of people. Now, if you're hiring a search firm that doesn't know how to find people, then that's more on it is on me. But I have this Rolodex, so tell me what you need. You need them in analytics, you need it here, you need it there. And I started feeling like I was in a position where you're talking to these other teams and I'm sourcing these different women, but there was not a space that I felt was a convening power for us, right? And so when I created this platform, She's Got Time, one of the things that I wanted to be intentional about was creating spaces that brought together intergenerational connectivity. And I really felt that was a disconnect for me. There's these OGs of the game who have been around, who have won. Bev, you talked about it. You've won. You've had this experience. How come this younger generation may not be able to tap into that? Where are the places they're going, or how are we connecting and making that real? And so I wanted to just continue to try to figure out how we convene not only our sisters, but to make spaces where you can have authentic conversations. I can't go to one more networking event where we just pass along an email and then what happens after that? Like, I ain't got time for that. Maybe y'all do, but we got kids, we got this, we got business. There's a lot of stuff going on. So if you're going to give up your time, let's just be about this time. Let's sit down, have a conversation. One of my best friends used to be my friend of me, I used to say back in the day, because she played at a different university, is a white woman. And she and I have had some of the most difficult conversations, so many nuanced things that maybe she didn't think about, I didn't think about. But the fact that I could have them in a safe space was important. And when I start thinking about creating like this platform, one of the things I said is that we have so many phones that are going on, like putting the phones down. I love going to like a comedy show or going to a space where they make me put the phone down. I get a little jittery because I'm like, if that babysitter called, Lord, is everything okay? But I'm experiencing the show. I'm able to tap into some stuff that we don't always get to tap into. And so when I created this platform, one of the things for me was to make it not about SWIN and about leading with Black women feeling safe in this space. If we're not going to cast a wider net for everybody to come in and to see us and to understand and be able to have conversations and dialogue, then we're not going to be able to get there. That intergenerational connectivity to me is that's the one thing I can say, Bev, that is missing so much from our young people, being able to get that shared knowledge and appreciation for a lot of women, a lot of things that women before us have done. And if I don't do anything else, my intention is going to be to make sure that our women have access and our women have the ability to get information so that they can get these jobs and be in these places and spaces and not just there for an email, but tell me, how do I get to a job? Tell me, how do I get to a bag? Tell me how I get more education. We're not sharing enough of that. And for me, that's where my sweet spot is right now. With any extra time that I have, is being intentional about servicing women, especially Black women, in that space.
But
And that is built to overcome the stereotype that we cannot work together, first and foremost. And it's a concerted effort for us not to depend on the wisdom of those who've gone before us. Like, I know the game. I've been at the University of Florida. I've been at the University of Texas. I've been the only Black on staff at one point at the University of Tennessee when Pat Head Summit was there. So being in those spaces, we've learned the games from every angle, especially if you're successful in those spaces. And that's the information that's not being shared, but it's deliberately being diminished in the value of a voice like a Dr. Wicker, a Dr. Jen. Like, let's not listen to them. A commissioner who's the first Black female commissioner of any Division 1, 2, or 3. How do we not tap into this? And we have to understand that if I diminish your value, I diminish your impact.
Yeah.
And we have to look beyond that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not sure who was going to speak next.
I wanted to say something.
Yeah, so so interesting we're talking about this when, so one of the company I'm acquiring right now, our tagline is, it's a career development company to help Black and brown professionals get jobs in the world of sports. That's our tagline. We are a career development. And so our fullest goal is my goal is to get 5,000 Black or brown people in the database within a year. And it's a career development company. The first level, it's free. You can put your resume in. Companies will be able to search. The second level is we are helping build careers. So we're going to have it that we'll look over resumes, do interview prep, help you. We're going to have a video library of how to write your resume, how to do a cover letter, what questions to ask in the interview, what questions are going to be asked of you. So fully trying to make that whole experience. So I'd love to chat with you about it, because for me, when I was thinking about acquiring this company, I was like, we need to find a way that, because like you said, people are like, I don't know any Black women in this position. Because I have this scroll of phenomenal Black women that can do everything times 50,000, but you're telling me you can't see it. And so for me, I was like, I want 5,000 within a year. So that you even have to question if you want a facilities person, a data person, someone that does signing at a basketball game, baby, you ain't got to ask. We're going to have this for you. And so that's my goal with this, that we're not only going to have the resumes, but we're also going to help you have the best resumes. We're going to make sure that you have the interview prep, all of those aspects, so that we are helping you develop your career, not just a resume. So that's the company I'm acquiring.
And I love it. We will talk, Jen. Love it.
And I want to just say today, Women Leaders, we co-sponsored with the Durham Sports Commission with women leaders in college sports today. So we had about 120 young women coming together to learn about careers and how to advance their careers. And we did roundtables, and it was so interesting. They went straight to the hard questions. How did you handle risk? How did you handle challenges? How did you handle uncomfortable conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Not about, well, what did you do to get in?
Right.
So we want to know, once we're in, how do we do all of these things? And so I think, Swin with she's got time, and Jen, the company that you're acquiring, it's so needed. I think about, we have to find our stars. right? And help them show their wonder. And one of the things is, like you said, in terms of intergenerational. So I'm retired. I do have a lot of jobs, but I'm still retired. But 3 to 4 days a week, I get the opportunity to babysit for the head coach, softball coach at North Carolina Central, because I want her to shine. And so if we talk about, right, Bev, in terms of we can't get along, but no. So when she comes to pick up her daughter and she wants to be an administrator, we sit and talk about what's her pathway, what are the things that she needs to do. And so you're right, that intergenerational, especially people like me and Coach Bev, who are retired, but we have the time and space, but we have to continue to be intentional about finding the stars, finding our Black women and men stars, and helping them shine and show their wonder.
And Doc, I just want to say real quickly to that point, I feel like the knowledge goes the other way too, right? Like I'm learning a lot from this next generation, and only because you said stars, I did want to mention I have a nonprofit called Rising Media Stars, and what we're trying to do is diversify sports broadcasting. I think 14% of all sports reporters right now are women. Those numbers are even smaller for Black women.
Absolutely.
So we take 5 Black women of color every year, and we prepare them for careers in broadcasting, from how do you ask questions to how do you dress to, building your reel to, all of the different aspects of media you need to know. And we actually take them into the field. They covered the Final Four. They cover our Atlanta Hawks here in Atlanta. Like they actually get into the field and get that experience. But I'm learning from these women. Like they're teaching me where my blind spots are. Like this is going to be the next generation of consumers. They're going to be the voices that are coming after us. And so there's so many platforms and apps and all this stuff coming up. They're keeping me in the know as well. So I think that information can go both ways, and that, we're keeping our minds open to what they have to teach us, while we're also handing them, those generational pieces of advice and anecdotes that, we've all learned along the way.
Commissioner, I have a question for you, because this conversation is powerful. I don't even know what to say. And make sure you look up those 2 foundations, and as well as the work that Dr. Jen is doing. But Commissioner, we have a generation of young people that are coming along that we can learn from. And I love the fact that I get to work with young people still. And then one thing I found with coaches that I've consulted with is they keep going back to how they used to do things, and they're not in step with how to communicate with this generation. And you being in this space, generational space, what is your feedback on that?
I totally agree. I mean, my team, we've been reading the remix. I think a lot of people have been reading this whole intergenerational and how to make the shifts to support their growth, to support their thought process, because it is very different. And as you're watching coaches, there's certain things. I think about my coach when I was playing. I'm like, there's no way he would be coaching or she would be coaching at this time. I mean, these kids, you can't say anything. The parents are connected to them every single day. The phones have them connected every single day. And so it's challenging, I think, for our coaches to be in the space. But I do think there's an opportunity for our coaches to learn, as we've heard, but also to continue to teach these young people what the boundaries and parameters are if you're a part of a team, if you're a part of an organization. I mean, what you do as a team, I truly believe, prepares us in these jobs and these roles that we have now. How we learn to play with others, how we learn to communicate and advocate for ourselves with our coaches, what our needs are, with your presidents. I mean, you are your CEO as an athlete, right? And coaches are probably challenged with that. But I think if coaches take a step back and see the opportunity they have to be the CEO of their team and make sure that they are connecting with their team in a way that they can be the best player, the best version of themselves, they're going to have to do some work too. Coaches have to do some work too. It's not just the athletes. As I was thinking about my husband and I and my daughter, we started during COVID, as everybody started their own business, the Sudden Change. And we called it Sudden Change, particularly because my husband played football. And we talked about how his culture, how we talk, you've got to make the shifts and changes on defense constantly. You got to know how to, change up your offense if the defense changes. It's just constantly. And in our business and in our personal challenges, we have sudden change. Dr. Wicker talked about retiring. You talked about going from coaching to administration. You have your own nonprofits. I mean, our athletes are thinking and seeing all the things that we're doing and the opportunities and access, and they want the same. Whether they're prepared or not, they want the same. So they're sudden changing immediately in their space. The problem is we're not doing the same in our space as these seasoned professionals, and we're going to have to make those shifts. I always say, no matter who you are, what position, titles are titles, but treating people, training people, and how we talk to people should always be in the same spirit of kindness, so that people can grow and learn and develop. And I think coaches and how we speak to our student athletes and how we teach student athletes to speak to adults and to advocate for themselves is truly important through passion. Understand your position and role, no matter if you're a team or the coach. Know that that platform that you have is important, because whether you're on the big screen or you're on the small screen, somebody's always watching you. And so we have to teach our young people that, as we have to teach coaches, because we've got some coaches that don't act. You don't want to be them. I don't want to be them, right? And so we've got coaches that have to be corrected as well, but also see the power that our student athletes have and the power that our coaches have in transforming and in shaping these young people that they're bringing to their campuses. There's a lot of work to be done. There's leadership programs that are happening. We have coaches that we're working with Dr. Wicker now with this We Coach program to put our coaches and administrators to talk about this intergenerational mix of making sure that we are providing in a way that we need to for these student athletes, but also for ourselves. I think a lot of how we manage ourselves starts with us before you can start with somebody else. And to me, that's more important we say that we can all work together. I agree 90% with you all, because 10% we don't. There are 10% of women of color who don't support other women of color because they're grabbing and reaching for their own security. And I think somehow we're going to have to help those individuals or help ourselves get to a place where we're okay helping each other in that way, but also helping our student athletes and accepting that it is a changing world and they deserve the opportunity just as much as we did in the old school way.
Absolutely.
Can I just jump onto that real quick?
Yeah.
I think the big thing, Jackie, with that is we have to get coaches used to understanding that athletes are going to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely.
Because we come from a time, right, of like, we didn't say nothing back to the coach. The coach said jump and you said how high. And now these athletes just have more questions. They're more curious. They're more inquisitive. And we have to be willing to do that. And a lot of coaches are like, well, back in the day, back in the day doesn't matter. You even have a cell phone back in the day. So we can't think of the back in the day leading us with this current generation. We have to get them to say, we understand it's different. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. You feel like you have a loss of control, because that's what it's really about. I have a loss of control because the things I used to always use to manage the team, I don't have them anymore. And I don't know what other tools there are.
Yeah.
Those are all valid emotions, and we have to shift and work better, because these athletes, if they can't advocate with you, baby, they're going to advocate with someone else.
Yeah. Well, and Jen, when you talk about that, think about the individuals that are hiring our coaches as well, right? So let's start with leadership in organizations, the commissioner, the athletic director, whoever you're hiring. I mean, you really have to be thoughtful about who you're bringing on your campuses and who are going to be the coaches that are going to be the examples and the mothers and fathers that these kids don't have on your camp. Like, who are those individuals and how are we hiring them? So I do think the leadership has some responsibility in making sure that our coaches are being responsible and communicating in a way where these student athletes feel like they have a safe space, because that's not the case on all our campuses, Black or white, right? So these young people need to have that safe space, but leadership has to recognize that they have a responsibility to hire administration and coaches that can support the well-being of our student athletes.
I think the last thing when I met with the coaches, my last meeting was, if you all don't learn more about emotional intelligence,
yes,
learn how to develop, your empathy skills, and learn how to communicate and connect with the Gen Z and the parents. And I told them, I'm one of them. you're not going to have a job. And I said it to them,
Yes.
Jen, yes, I am one of them. You're not going to have a job. And it's as simple as that. The power is no longer in their pen, and the power of the pen is no longer with the coach. So,
Yeah.
Jen, you're shaking your head quite a lot. I'm not bad.
I'm not. I'm going to plead the fifth, but I have been with you while Sydney was been growing up, so I will plead the fifth right now and unmute myself.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, so I wanna weigh in there. You know, this control aspect and athletes having or not having a voice. Not having a voice is extremely dangerous. Having gone to a predominantly white institution, I went to USC. I was part of the class of women who were assaulted by the only gynecologist on staff for 27 years. 27 years. And so as a scholarship athlete, your insurance, your health insurance comes through the school. So you're basically a default employee and not able to go anyplace else. So one of the things that is extremely important, and I'm glad that you touched on this about the safety and where we're getting our coaches. There's a young Black doctor, her name is Dr. Yetza Kende. She has a think tank at Yale. She's actually at University of Pittsburgh right now, but the think tank is at Yale. That's where she started it. She is doing research around safer sport. And her theory is if we teach to the marginalized community, Black athletes that have some sort of disability, that if we teach to those two demographics, everybody else benefits, because we're the ones that don't get the service. We don't get the research. We don't get the consideration. And so if we can support organizations and doctors who are doing this type of work and who are really focusing on Black women and other marginalized communities, then we have the ability to move the needle. But a lot of it starts with awareness, even knowing the work is taking place, and how can we support it. Yeah. And so I really wanted to throw that in, especially with my personal experience and knowing that it could have been different.
Yeah. When I walked into the University of Texas, during my interview, I said, "You've hired a black, not a black white." And everyone, including the Black men, looked at me and go, "What does that mean?" I said, "You've hired someone that may not fit your comfort zone. I'm aware of who I am in this space and what my responsibility is to that space." Jody Conrad understood that positioning, but my next boss did not. So I was not as supported. It's important that administrators understand the isolation of Black athletes in historically white institutions. And I advocated that there were no people of power that looked like us in the decision-making process. They said, "Well, we have a Black who's an assistant AD." I said, "No, he's the strength coach. He has no voice to say yes and no." So as you guys move through this space of the business of sport, now we're advocating for more people of color to be in spaces to make decisions. And with the microphone in front of you, Swin, and the microphone in front of you, LaChina, as well as the other administrators, because when Dr. Jen, as you guys can see, when she walks in the room, they're going to have to listen. So it's important that when we get in these spaces, that we know what we're advocating for. Because I started the first minority mentorship program, and they made me change it from African American mentorship program because it implied that it was for Black students. So I shifted the name and did the same thing because it fit their comfort zone.
Yeah, love that.
So as you walk into these spaces and as we end this conversation, let's end on a what are we doing or what should we be doing in order to move the needle so that we can protect each other in these spaces, and not just simply protect, but to support, because that's of vital importance.
Coach Bev, I just want to say it's an honor to be on this conversation with you. And that when they reached out and they said Coach Bev wanted my number, I was like, she does. I'm still a little bit in
I
awe.
love you.
I'm feeling just listening to you talk about your experiences is amazing. And I just had a couple quick things that I wanted to say. Number one is we really have to watch this NIL movement. There's a lot of money moving around with NIL. And I don't know that our Black female athletes are being serviced in the way that they need to be in terms of understanding their brand and their brand power. When you look at the heads of a lot of these brand development companies that are just sucking up these contracts with our colleges and universities, where are the Black women in leadership? Where are the Black women that are helping develop brands? So that's one thing we definitely need to keep our eyes on. The other thing, and we've alluded to it, but just flat out, we have to have more Black women in leadership position, in particular where the money moves. And Bev, I know you Coach Bev, you talked early about the WNBA and where's the money. And there's one particular story that just stands out to me, in that, I know this was happening way before my time with the W, but this particular situation just stands out. I have a friend named Sharice Williams-Gee, and she is now over marketing for what's Steph Curry's shoe.
Under
What is it?
Oh, his Under Armour shoe? Or?
Under Armour. I'm not a sneaker person. So Under Armour. I'm not a gear person at all. Yes, Under Armour. And so she's over marketing there, but she used to be over marketing at PepsiCo. And one of the first major deals she did was she signed Asia Wilson to a Mountain Dew deal with Pepsi. And I just remember how groundbreaking that felt to walk in a grocery store and see Asia Wilson on these cans. And here's a Black woman who controlled the money, making the decision for another Black woman, right? For a Black athlete. So we have to have more of us in those rooms where those decisions are being made, in places of leadership. And then last but not least, I'm going to continue to do my job in the media space of being a voice, bringing along other Black women in media that will want to be the voice, so we can help to shift the narratives. I know we don't have time to get into Dawn's comments at the end of the tournament, but I do believe that there was so much truth to what she spoke about, how her teams were talked about versus, other teams, and how we frame Black women in sports. So all of that has
let
to
me
change.
add something in there for you and you guys to comment on, because that's critical. Dawn is having to address issues that the average coach doesn't. I could have won more had I not had to deal with the adversity. I probably had more athletes DQ'd. I even had one athlete DQ'd as they were heading onto the podium. It's like they counted the points in the back and pulled her out, because there's a deliberate. Now, when I create the narrative that Dawn's team is Black and overly aggressive, what are the referees looking for? So anything her team did, her top two players, defensive players, were on the bench within the first quarter. That's because of a narrative that we didn't control, and she had to address, where no other coach has to address. So let's give homage to any Black coach that wins, simply because they face different obstacles to get there. So LaChina, you are absolutely right in what she had to discuss, that not even LSU's coach addressed it, nor was she ever even asked. That's interesting.
Coach Kearney, that it happens so, and Dawn has that, she's so visible in that platform that she has. She's so visible that you can only take so much, that you have to say something, right? Yes. Because that happens so often in the spaces probably all of us are in. I know it happens to me all the time, as you're sitting in these rooms and you're hearing the passive aggressive comments about HBCUs or teams, or your teams don't get in. And there's all the excuses of why you didn't pick the Black postgraduate scholarship, or why they didn't get, it's crazy. And I hope that Dawn never feels like she's on an island by herself. I hope that other coaches and all of us should be rallying around and helping her navigate in this space, because it can feel extremely isolating as women of color in these positions, and particularly when you have these types of platforms. And it can be mentally draining. And she's not going to stop. She never has. And I don't think any of us. So as I continue to move, I'm going to continue to fight and advocate and speak, to those who maybe agree or disagree, black, white, red, or yellow. Because at the end of the day, my responsibility for this conference is to protect the brand, to give these student athletes the best opportunity that they can ever have in college athletics, to ensure that women and men have the opportunity, particularly Black and Brown, have access and opportunity, whether they want to be in college sports, professional sports, or wherever it is, and to help them navigate in that space when nobody else can. Mm-hmm. We are individuals that have voices for the voiceless. Mm-hmm. And you have to see yourself in that position. And so wherever I can put myself, even when I don't feel like it, and when I get in that place where I don't want to be on another committee and I don't want to have to speak on this again, I remember who did speak on my behalf way before college athletics, mm-hmm. and my responsibility in that. So I hope that I continue to have the strength to plight and fight and serve based on what the God given me the gift to do. And so at the end of the day, we have a responsibility. And
HBCUs aren't always the 16th seed. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired. I know, but I'm glad Dawn said it.
She said it.
I'm glad she said it.
And behind the scenes, we have presidents and ADs that are calling and making calls, trying to get the why. Yeah. And I worked at the NCAA, so you're in those conversations, and I mean, it's tough, and it's not just basketball. It's across all of our championships and opportunities that we provide, that our Black and Brown athletes get to show up in.
Yeah, we appreciate the work you do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think one comment I'll just make quickly, because I know we're on here, is that we're doing this, as you said earlier, Bev, because we care. Everybody on here cares. But I think also Black women need to understand it is hurtful when you know what your sister is going through, to not to give grace in situations. And sometimes we can be the hardest on each other when we have to have a level of grace that we can give to be able to communicate and talk in a space, because you should understand and reflect. And I've been hurt by it before, because you'll go all the way out there on a limb and you'll try to do what's right, and you'll hire, you'll do this, you'll do that. But don't let it stop you moving forward. So whoever's on here, whoever's watching this, just know, just because one situation doesn't work out, the work is still the work, and we still have to move forward, because you can definitely be burned and be scarred at times, but the work is the work, and it is bigger than just one individual. And we have to learn how to give grace. That's one of the things.
That's powerful, and so very true, because it becomes cringeworthy for us when we see a Black person doing something. We say, don't do that. No, be you, authentically you. But they're not being disrespectful. They're just elevating the game. And we have to understand that. And for so long, we're always on edge on how we represent each other. Nobody else carries that banner when they walk into a room. They get to walk in the room and represent themselves or their family or a school. We represent a whole race of people and a whole gender of people.
Yeah.
It's an unfair expectation, even what we place on each other. So we have to show love and grace. I love that. Thank you. Leslie or...
I was just going to say, Bev, I think I would add that, we talked about intentionality, and to really put teeth into that is looking at your schedule from a resource perspective. Resources isn't always money. It can be time, it can be experience, it can be, having a job come across your page on LinkedIn, taking a picture of it and sending it to your girl who would be perfect for that position. So there's a lot of different ways that it can show up. But if we're willing to be creative and willing to take the time to figure out what can I do and what's a stretch, and how can I responsibly do that. The other thing that I would offer is to not get caught in the trap of perfectionism. Perfectionism is a trap. We will chase our tails for more days than a few. Excellence, yes, because the definition of excellence is a very good or outstanding outcome. We've all had that. I don't care if it happened when you were in kindergarten, you could stand in line.
Yeah.
So start there and start to build on that. Use our resources. Don't get trapped by perfectionism. And the other thing is, and I believe this and I can't say it enough, we exist in relationships. So we don't
Yes.
have to be siloed. And I love the intergenerational conversation. I'm looking for a 40-year-old COO right now, somebody who has a big business degree and has worked for corporate and startup. Now, if that's not intergenerational, I don't know what is. I know the things that I know, and I'm always growing, but I'm also smart enough to know what I don't know. And willing
That's
to
the key.
have
Preach.
lack of ego to bring somebody in and to set them up for legacy. So, we can work together and we can create something that is clearly Black women magical. Okay. And I'm not going to say Black girl magic, Black women magical.
One of the things I wanted to share is that being engaged with ABIS over the last 6-7 months has been amazing because I get to spend time with Bev, Nikki Fargas, Gary Charles and the board, and then these are the conversations that we have, and we try to put these conversations in a context to make action, to put things in action to help others. And so this has just been amazing. One of the things that Bev and I talk about is one of the agreements from the 4 Agreements book by Miguel Ruiz, and don't take anything personally. And if we really understand what our goal is and understanding that when people are coming at us, it's really their problems. And that's what we've already said tonight. It's just kind of what we've talked about. Just don't take it personally. Just figure out, okay, while you're doing all this, where do I need to be? And stay focused on the goal.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is Kim Ford in the chat talked about kindness, and someone just talked about grace. And I just gave a speech on leading with gratitude, grace, and kindness. So although we want to be authentically, we want to advocate for ourselves, but we still have to remember those things because there's such a lack of civility in this world today. And we have to teach this to our young people, are those 3 things: gratitude, being grateful every day, being kind, and giving people grace. And then the last thing I will say is I want y'all to continue showing your wonder. You all are amazing people and amazing women, and we just have to keep doing that.
Anyone, Dr. Jen? I don't know who else haven't spoken to say their last word.
I know I'm gonna, Ingrid's gonna be annoyed with me, but this is some badass women. And I think like everything. Okay, thank you, Mom. I think the thing about it is that we're coming from such different angles, and it is that intergenerational thought, because there are many times where I would call Wick and be like, hey, I have this problem I need to navigate, and then she would call me for her business. So it's not always just a one direction, but it's always these 2 directional things that people have to give as much as they get. That is so critical, that will help lift us all up. And that's the goal at the end of the day, is that we have to find ways to lift us all up because we understand our problems, and who better to move us forward than the folks that truly understand our problems.
Anyone else before we end? I'd just like to say thank you all for just the amazing diversity of views that all culminated into one graceful presentation. It was amazing conversation. I just want to say I love each of you. I honor the spaces that you're in, whether you're creating entrepreneurship, all of you are entrepreneurs, but then those that support the foundations of these women, support the businesses, but also find a way to contribute. Ash Samuels on here and I exchanged. She's very good at wanting to produce. I needed a producer. She needed a show. We worked it out, and she's done a fantastic job. And just know that, ladies, anything you need, I'm here to serve. And most importantly, it's our ability to communicate. For all the athletes that may be listening, please get out of your comfort zone and don't just hang out with each other, but learn from every experience and every opportunity you get in these institutions. For all the coaches, understand this. They're not challenging your ego. If they ask you a question that you don't know, find out. But take the time to teach, because sometimes their questions tell you what you don't know already. And it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know again. So you should always be in a perpetual state of learning. You should always be in a perpetual state of giving. You should always be in a perpetual state of love. Now, the last thing I want to do is to mention, because I got to support my sister on here. ABIS has an event on the 2nd to the 3rd, which is a huge gala. But also SWIN has an event called She's Got Game. That's on June 28th through the 30th. SWIN, would you like to give a shout out to your event coming up? It's on the screen right now.
Oh, yeah. People can find out more about it. They can go to she'sgottime.com. Obviously, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but super excited to bring, this is just a few of the speakers that are going to be there. Just bringing a whole group of women. It's like when you put up that bat signal and you say, you know what, we're trying to do something different. We're trying to convene in a way that's authentic and true. Then we want you to show up. And then all these women just, they're there. But China, she's on here as well. She's going to be there. And listen, we want to have some real conversations. We want to give women an opportunity to feel they have a space to be their authentic selves, to learn, to grow, to share. And I'm super excited about it. Like I said, you can go to she'sgottime.com.
And thank you guys, because one of the things that ABIS as well as myself wanted to create is a safe space to discuss issues that the mainstream may not want to hear. But it's a conversation that needed to be had. And I thank you, ladies, for having the courage and donating your time and your expertise and your wisdom into sharing. God bless you all. And we have a great show for the 3rd. It's going to be on self-care, how to move through your purpose in peace so that it doesn't overcost you. We also have the Women of Motorsports on May 10th, which is Formula One, as well as NASCAR women. And we also have a men's panel coming up on the 17th, and that'll end our season of shows. Ladies, I thank you. I bless you. Gary Charles, don't forget, everyone, June 2nd through the 3rd, which is ABIS Champions and Legends. Support. We need you. God bless, and thank you all.